I remember texting my mom saying, I can't do this anymore. I told God, you feel the pain of my heart. Me and my child are ruining this family. And I said, I know, my God, you're protective of me. You'll get me out of here. That was my last night.
She stood on camera and told millions of people that her mother had fractured her spine, that she just needed a few weeks to rest, that she would be back soon, that everything was going to be okay. That was on Daystar Television Network. That was on a Christian broadcast reaching more than 100 million homes. And it was a lie, because Joni Lamb had been privately battling metastatic breast cancer that had spread into her bones, a diagnosis that existed for 2 years before those words were spoken on air. Joni Lamb never came back. She died on May 7th, 2026. And the woman who told the world she was recovering from a back injury is now, according to Wikipedia and multiple sources tracking the network, the key person in leadership at Daystar. Her name is Rachel Lamb Brown. And today we are going to go through all of it: the lies on air, the letters from Joni that say something completely different, the allegations surrounding her husband, Josh Brown, the bot accounts, the Department of Church Accountability, and what it means for a ministry of this size to have arrived here. Stay with us, because this story is enormous and every piece of it matters. Before we go a single step further, here is what this video is and what it is not. This is a presentation of publicly documented facts, verified reporting from the Roy's Report and journalist Julie Roy's, statements made on air that are part of the broadcast record, letters that have been made public, Wikipedia's current listing of Daystar Television Network leadership, and patterns that are documented across multiple primary sources. This is not a trial. This is not a verdict. Where allegations have been made, we will say they are allegations. Where things are proven and documented, we will say so. Where things remain unresolved, we will say that too. The standard here is what the documented record supports. Nothing more. Let's begin. To understand the weight of what we are about to discuss, you need to understand what Daystar Television Network actually is. Founded in 1993 by Marcus and Joni Lamb in Dallas, Texas, Daystar grew from a single Christian television station, originally KMPX, into one of the largest Christian broadcast networks on the face of the earth. The network is headquartered in Bedford, Texas, is owned by the Word of God Fellowship, and reaches viewers across the United States on broadcast television, cable, satellite services, including DirecTV and Dish Network, and internationally. This is not a small ministry. This is a media empire built on the faith and financial generosity of millions of viewers who trusted the Lamb family and the network they built. Marcus Lamb died on November 30th, 2021, following complications from COVID-19. Joni Lamb, his wife and co-founder, became president of Daystar after his death and held that position until her own death on May 7th, 2026. With Joni's passing, according to the Associated Press and confirmed by Wikipedia's current entry on the network, leadership of Daystar was transferred to the network's board of directors. And the key person now listed in connection with Daystar's leadership, per Wikipedia, is Rachel Lamb Brown, the couple's daughter, and the same woman who stood on Ministry Now and told viewers her mother was healing from a back fracture and would soon return. Let that sink in. Because the gap between what was said on air and what was actually happening behind those studio walls is not a small discrepancy. It is the defining question of accountability at Daystar right now. Let us be very precise about what happened and what is now documented. Joni Lamb had been diagnosed with breast cancer that had metastasized into her bones. According to testimony from sources close to the family and reported through the Roy's Report, that diagnosis was known approximately 2 years before Joni's death. That means it was known when viewers were being told she had hairline fractures on her spine, injuries on the T11 and L1 vertebrae, and when Rachel and others on set were asking the Daystar family to pray for her recovery and assuring them she would be back very soon. Rachel Lamb Brown appeared on air during this period. She publicly thanked viewers for their prayers. She spoke warmly and optimistically. She described her mother waking up with a great attitude. She told viewers that the little people, her children, Joni's grandchildren, had made get-well posters with their handprints and footprints for their grandmother to look at while she healed. It was presented as a touching temporary trial, and every word of it was either a knowing misrepresentation or a stunning failure of transparency toward the millions of viewers who gave financially and spiritually to that network based on trust. There are only two possible explanations for what was said on air, and neither one reflects well on Daystar's leadership. Either Rachel Lamb Brown knew about her mother's terminal cancer diagnosis and chose to say none of it, presenting back fractures as the story while viewers donated and prayed, or she was herself kept in the dark about the severity of her own mother's condition. Both scenarios raise profound questions. If she knew and said nothing, it is a deliberate deception of the Daystar audience that trusted them. If she did not know, it raises immediate questions about who did know, who controlled that information, and why a dying woman's own daughter was apparently shielded from the truth about her mother's condition. What What we know with certainty is this. Joni Lamb died in Mexico at a facility called Oasis of Hope, where she had been taken for treatment in the final days of her life, days during which, according to reporting, her children did not know she had been transported out of the country. The anonymous family friend who spoke to Julie Roys described a text message she received from Joni in those final days that did not sound like Joni at all. Cold and brief in a way that led her to suspect Doug Weiss had taken control of Joni's phone and was fielding her messages for her. Joni Lamb died in Mexico, not at home surrounded by her family, and that context is not incidental. It is part of the complete picture of how this story ended. Because the picture of Rachel Lamb Brown as a trusted successor to the Daystar ministry cannot be evaluated honestly without looking at what Joni herself wrote, not to viewers, not for public consumption, but privately to her children and their spouses. We need to walk through those letters, which have now been made public. In October of 2018, Joni Lamb wrote personal letters to each of her children. The letter to Susie Lamb, Jonathan's wife, reads in part, "You have been such a delight and a blessing to our family. Your laugh, your smile, your joy, your passion is such a blessing to behold. I am so excited about all that God has for you in the days ahead. Thank you for loving my son so well. Thank you for being such a loving and fun mom. You are beautiful inside and out, a princess with a heart of a lioness." Joni then wrote, "My words of wisdom to you are to always remember that God has given you Jonathan as your covering. Honor, love, and respect the quiet, strong wisdom that he will give you throughout your marriage. As you honor your husband, God will raise him up to be the leader that he has called him to be. Continue to spend your quiet time with the one who loves you most. God will use you mightily to preach the word." And then Joni wrote this, "Remember, the enemy would love to divide our family. Do not allow him an inch. Love freely, forgive quickly, and never allow your emotions to rule your life. Listen carefully to Holy Spirit, and he will always lead you down the path of truth." The letter to Jonathan reads, "Jonathan Mark, my firstborn and a delight to my heart, a true gift from God. You are handsome, strong, kind, gentle, patient, long-suffering, humble, and a leader in the making. Thank you for living a godly life and having the fear of the Lord in your life. Thank you for loving your wife so beautifully and meeting all of her needs. Thank you for being such an amazing father. Always be fair to everyone who is under your authority. Listen to both sides. Ask the Holy Spirit to guide you when you are unsure of a situation. Never lose compassion for the hurting. Dad and I are so proud of you. Love always, Mom." These letters were written in 2018, before Doug Weiss entered the picture, before the marriage controversy, before Jonathan and Susie were fired, before Jonathan was placed under surveillance with a GPS tracker in his company vehicle, before a private investigator followed his family through neighborhood streets with his children in the car. In 2018, Joni Lamb wrote to her daughter-in-law that Jonathan was her covering. She wrote to her son that the enemy would try to divide the family and that they must not allow it an inch. She described Jonathan as a leader in the making. That is the same man who was eventually told by a board member, under pressure from Joni in a dramatically different season, that he needed to sign a non-disclosure agreement or lose everything he had built his adult life around. What changed? According to every documented account, the catalyst was Doug Weiss, a man who, by his own words in a recorded video clip, had wanted a show on Daystar for over 20 years, who filed for divorce from his wife of 30 years around January or February of 2022, who fast-tracked the divorce process by securing a loan to pay a $2 million settlement to his former wife, Lisa Weiss, and who appeared on Daystar's Ministry Now program in April of 2022, after the divorce process was already underway, presenting himself as happily married. He subsequently married Joni Lamb, and from that point forward, by every documented account, the atmosphere inside the Lamb family and inside Daystar television network changed. The fracture between Jonathan and Susie Lamb and Joni became irreparable following a meeting in July 2023, when Joni and her ally, Pastor Jimmy Evans, reportedly told Jonathan and Susie over 100 times to submit to Joni's authority regarding the marriage to Weiss. According to reporting by the Roys Report, the couple had refused to read on air a viewer comment celebrating Joni's marriage because they believed Doug Weiss did not have biblical grounds for divorcing his previous wife, and they considered the marriage adulterous. For that refusal, Susie was fired. Jonathan was removed from on-air roles, stripped of his executive position, had his salary cut by 40% from $250,000 to $150,000, and was eventually terminated entirely. What makes the trajectory so documented and so difficult to dismiss is the trail of evidence that accompanied it. On November 7th, 2023, Jonathan felt prompted to check Daystar's security camera feeds he had access to as vice president and observed Shannon Kelly, Daystar's head of security, opening the trunk of his company vehicle and reaching inside. A mechanic subsequently found a GPS tracking device. Shannon Kelly's own expense report, which Jonathan provided to the Roy's report, showed that tracking devices had been purchased in October of 2023, nearly 2 years after Daystar later claimed trackers had been installed in all company vehicles following Marcus Lamb's death in 2021. The story did not hold up against the documentation. Then, on September 6, 2024, Jonathan and Susie discovered they were being followed by a private investigator while driving their children on local streets. They released footage. They confronted the man on camera. His license plate was registered to a private investigator named Jameson Bradley Parker. Daystar did not respond to multiple inquiries about whether it had hired him. And on November 16, 2024, the same date as the prior year's board meeting, Shannon Kelly arrived at Jonathan and Susie's home carrying a gun and wearing a bulletproof vest to deliver Jonathan's termination letter. Jonathan told the Roy's report that Daystar had never in its history delivered a termination letter on a Saturday, and that the method appeared designed, like everything else, to intimidate. It is within this complete documented context that the question of Rachel Lamb Brown's elevation to what Wikipedia and other sources now identify as the key leadership role at Daystar must be examined honestly. Rachel Lamb Brown is married to Josh Brown, identified across all of the Roy's report's coverage as the man Jonathan and Susie Lamb allege molested their young daughter, referred to throughout coverage as Baby Lamb, in a separate bedroom incident during a family beach vacation. Josh Brown has denied all allegations. The Colleyville, Texas police investigation was closed after approximately 18 months due to what authorities described as lack of evidence. Josh Brown voluntarily took and passed 2 forensic polygraph examinations and was never named a person of interest by police. Those are facts. They are also in the record. So are the facts that Jonathan and Susie say Marcus and Joni Lamb were told about what allegedly happened and covered it up rather than investigating it properly. So is the testimony of Denise Boggs, a close family friend and counselor, who told the Roy's report that a forensic investigation she initiated in August 2021 was shut down by Marcus and Joni before the suspect family member could be properly interviewed. Those allegations remain unresolved legally. What is resolved is the documented pattern of how the Lamb family institution handled disclosures of wrongdoing, not by immediately reporting to authorities, not by demanding transparency, but by closing ranks, managing appearances, and, in the case of the women who raised concerns about Marcus Lamb's own extramarital conduct years earlier, calling them blackmailers on national television, a characterization made during a Dr. Phil appearance that was orchestrated by a PR firm Joni herself later reportedly acknowledged in a private setting captured on tape, was part of a strategy involving lies. The same Rachel Lamb Brown who appeared on Ministry Now telling viewers her mother would be back after a back injury, the same Rachel Lamb Brown who reportedly, according to multiple people tracking the situation, has been linked through analysis of IP addresses and account behavior patterns to a social media presence called the Department of Church Accountability, which has been used to challenge, deflect, and discredit people speaking publicly about Daystar D, is now, according to Wikipedia's current listing for the Daystar television network, listed under Key People as the network's leading figure following her mother's death. There has been no official, transparent press release announcing Rachel's role. There has been no board statement to the public. There has been no formal declaration of governance transition of the kind a 501c3 nonprofit of Daystar's scale owes to its donors, its viewers, and the public record. What there has been is a Wikipedia entry reflecting the reality on the ground, a social media presence, a continued on-air presence, and the absence of Jonathan Lamb from anything connected to the ministry his own father founded and whose succession plan named Jonathan as the intended successor. What Daystar represents in the context of the broader Christian media landscape is not simply a family dispute. It is something larger, an understanding that requires stepping back from the individual names and looking at the structural reality. Daystar Television Network is a nonprofit organization incorporated under 501c3 of the United States Tax Code. That status confers significant financial benefits. It also carries significant obligations of transparency, governance, and accountability to the public and to the donors who fund the ministry. When the president of that organization is dying of metastatic bone cancer and the viewers who fund that organization through donations and partner contributions are being told she has a fractured spine and will return, that is not a private family matter. That is a governance failure with direct implications for donor trust and the legal and ethical obligations of nonprofit leadership. When a succession crisis unfolds, when there are documented questions about who actually leads the network, what Marcus Lamb's succession plan actually said, whether the board properly honored Joni's own stated wishes in her final weeks, as reported by a verified family friend to Julie Roy's, whether Jonathan Lamb was railroaded out of the organization his parents built, that is not a private family matter either. That is a question of whether one of the largest Christian broadcast networks in the world is being governed with integrity, or whether it is being controlled by whoever won a private power struggle inside the walls of a Bedford, Texas studio. And when the woman now, apparently at the helm of that network, is the same woman who stood on camera and participated in telling millions of Christian viewers that her terminally ill mother was recovering from a back injury, that is a question of character that those millions of viewers deserve to have answered honestly. There is something that must be stated clearly, because the documented record supports it and fairness demands it. Jonathan and Susie Lamb, throughout every chapter of this story that has been documented across hundreds of hours of recorded interviews, public statements, and on-camera appearances, have been consistent. Their account has not shifted. Their documentation, the emails, the recordings, the expense reports, the security footage, the NDA meeting audio, the letters from Marcus and Joni, has held up under scrutiny. Multiple independent sources, including the Roy's Report's journalism under Julie Roy's, have corroborated core elements of their account. They did not lie about the tracker in the car. The expense report confirmed the timing. They did not lie about being followed. The footage of the private investigator exists. They did not lie about the board meeting. It was recorded and publicly released. They refused to read an endorsement of a marriage they believed was spiritually wrong, and they were persecuted institutionally for that refusal. In a Christian organization built on the premise of truth and the fear of God, Jonathan and Susie Lamb demonstrated more integrity than many of the people in positions of authority around them, and they paid for it with their careers, their income, their standing in the ministry family they had devoted their lives to, and ultimately, the chance to say goodbye to Joni Lamb before she died. Jonathan was informed of his mother's death approximately 10 minutes before Daystar announced it publicly on social media. He was banned from the family stage at her memorial service. His face was removed from the memorial slideshow. He was treated at his own mother's funeral as a stranger to the ministry his father built. And now, the organization his father's succession plan named him to eventually lead is being run, without public announcement, without formal board transparency, without honoring the documented wishes of either Marcus or Joni Lamb in their final seasons of life, by his sister, the same sister who, by documented account, refused to meet with him for reconciliation in the days before that funeral, who is allegedly engaged in coordinated social media campaigns to attack those speaking publicly about Daystar, and whose husband remains at the center of unresolved and deeply disturbing allegations about the safety of children in the Lamb family's inner circle. We are not here to tell you what to think. We are here to lay out what is documented so that you can weigh it. But there are questions that a Christian organization of Daystar's size and influence simply must answer, not for the benefit of commentators, not for the satisfaction of critics, but for the millions of people who give their hard-earned money to that network because they believe it stands for truth and the gospel of Jesus Christ. Who officially leads Daystar Television Network right now, and by what process was that decision made? Has the board communicated transparently with the nonprofit stakeholders about its governance structure? What has happened to Marcus Lamb's documented succession plan? What has happened to the family friend's verified testimony that Joni, in her final weeks of life, told board member Tom Callender to give Daystar back to Jonathan if he reached out? And if Rachel Lamb Brown is now effectively at the helm of Daystar, what does the board say about the documented pattern of misrepresentations made on air, the allegations connected to her household, and the treatment of Jonathan and Susie Lamb throughout this entire saga? Those are not gotcha questions. They are the basic accountability questions every 501c3 in America owes to its donors and the public record. Daystar has the platform and the resources to answer them clearly and honestly. The question is whether it will choose to do so. As the Apostle Paul wrote in Galatians, I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and returning to a different gospel. A gospel of cover-up, of intimidation, of GPS trackers and private investigators, of on-air lies about a dying woman's health, and of closed-door succession battles. That is not the gospel that Marcus and Joni Lamb built Daystar to carry. It is the opposite of it, and the people watching from the outside can see the difference. God help those who cannot. If you want to keep following this story with documented facts, no speculation, and no clickbait beyond the truth itself, please subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who is watching the Daystar situation unfold. And if you have documentation, not rumors, not secondhand stories, but primary evidence, we want to hear from you. The truth does not need embellishment. It just needs to be told. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one.